This morning, our subject is we got a lot of subjects, and whether or not we get to them all, we will see. But we're going to talk about violence in Congress, which is actually a violently fun story to talk about because it's something that you wouldn't think should happen in American government. I mean, we call American government civics because there's supposed to be a level of civility within our government. Civility is a word that we don't use enough today. It just means we're supposed to be kind to each other. It doesn't matter if we have differences of opinions. It doesn't matter if we don't really like each other when we're dealing with politics, when we're dealing with government, when we're forced to work with each other in society. We've got to find ways to get along. That's civics, that's civility. At some point in your adult life, you'll be forced to work with someone you don't care for very much. But in work, you have to be civil to them. So when we see violence taking place in the heart of the government that is supposed to be the most tolerant, yes, we know in history we have issues with that, but that's how it's built, is with the intentions of being the most tolerant. And we see violence taking place amongst the men that are there. We got some issues. And all the stuff that we're looking at in this chapter is boiling up to the point where the kettle of, remember how you put spaghetti in a pot and you boil it, and if you don't pay attention to it, pretty soon it goes all over the stove, and then you have a mess. Right now, Jace is like, I don't even know how to turn the stove on. Do you, Jace? Really? What's your go-to? Can you make pancakes on a Sunday morning? There was an awful long hesitation there. You all should know how to make pancakes on a Sunday morning for breakfast. Learn it. It's a skill. I know Ella's maxed out at mac and cheese with hot dogs chopped up in it, but you can do better. Maybe you should sign up for FCS class. Learn how to make pumpkin muffins or whatever. By the way, if you have any questions about that stuff that they went over last night that you don't get or your parents don't get, or if you don't have older brothers and sisters to help you with that process, I'll help you as much as I can with like fatherly information, having been through it with Taryn. So not so much teacher, but father. I can give you teacher advice too, but I've been there before a little bit. And even saying that, I'm still a little confused or concerned with what I'm going to have my son do. So don't be afraid to ask questions. I know all of your teachers here will help too, but their presentation last night was okay. Anyway, we're going to talk about another man, a black man named Dred Scott. His story is kind of short, and it's iffy whether it should even show up in the history books because of the outcome. So we'll talk about that. And then I hope to at least introduce you to two new political candidates on the scene. Abraham Lincoln, have you heard of him before? Of course you have. And a man named Stephen Douglas. And these two are bitter rivals when it comes to politics, but they're not really that far away in their thinking. So we'll take a look at them, and they have a series of debates. Debates is a way, well, sometimes we work on choosing our presidential candidates or presidents this way also. We put them on a stage, we ask them each a question, we let them elaborate on their answer, and then the other one gets to argue back and forth with them. A debate is a controlled argument, a civil argument, where two men or two women or a man and a woman or a man and a turtle can just argue about things, and you're allowed then to judge their answers and determine who you want to vote for. So that's kind of the way we've always gone about choosing our candidates. And then you do have an assignment for me, so let's see. You're in charge of making sure with 5 minutes left, I stop whatever I'm doing and hand out this worksheet. If you forget, everyone else gets 100 and you get a 0. It's a lot of pressure. Everyone except for him gets 100. You and him get 0. So I guess you're her wingman, backing her up on the 5-minute rule. Okay. The worksheet says quiz on it, but it's not a quiz. It's just a worksheet. So I know the last one said worksheet and it was a quiz. This one is just a worksheet. It's just review over section 1 and 2, which we should be done with today. hopefully, or really close to it. So if there are any questions on there that we haven't gone over yet, I'll just have you X them off. But it's like 10 or 15 questions. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. You'll be able to do it. Okay, any questions before we get started? Good. So the last thing we talked about, we took a nice deep dive look into this picture. And we did a reenactment with this picture, I think, where we had someone dressed up as John Brown. Maya was John Brown. John Brown was a man. Who chose Maya?
You did.
Really?
Yeah.
Weird. Maybe that's why she was staring at me last night. So weird. Strange. Anyway, so we took a look at the picture and we saw the symbolism, and we were able, for the most part, to kind of pick out the who, what, the when, the where, the how, the why of this event. So we kind of knew it was Kansas because of the tornado and the prairie fire and because of the wagons heading westward. And we kind of knew it had something to do with an oncoming conflict, a war. And most of you, some of you are able to pick out the fact that there's a Confederate flag, so it is the Civil War. We had blue and gray uniforms, so we really used this picture to dive into previous knowledge. What did we already know, and what do we need to know about it? And then that's where we ended up with this. We talked briefly about John Brown's personal life and how he had 7 children with his first wife, Diantha, and she passed away giving birth, and then he remarried within a couple of weeks to her bestie, which always stands out to people because that seems really odd to us, especially in that short amount of time, but it was probably relatively normal at that time. So he wasn't doing anything that was considered creepy at the time. But there's a lot of things in history that we would consider weird or creepy today that they didn't at that time. It's just kind of difficult, and someday when you're of age that you start looking for a life person, someone that you're going to spend the rest of your life with, it isn't easy, and we have a lot of connection to a lot of people. You know, we can go to Omaha and meet people. We're not trapped in a small community of farmers and with very little access to the outside world. So we have farmersonly.com, right, Edward? You don't have to be lonely. You don't know the... Thanks, Jelly, with farmersonly.com. Still, it was great. Okay, so let me tell you this story. Before I put it up here, let me go over our players here. This is the violence in Congress that I was wanting to talk about. First of all, we have this guy. His name is Charles Sumner. Charles Sumner is a senator from the state of Massachusetts. He's anti-slave. Okay, so Charles Sumner we would consider an abolitionist. The year is 1856. So it's 4 full years before the real beginning of the Civil War, but oftentimes there's a prelude to war. It's not like instant and immediate. In fact, if we use current events, how long have those of you that pay attention to the news, how long have the Russians been sort of building up on the Ukrainian border? Was it last week? It's been a couple of months. So we've mostly been able to kind of tell something's coming. Can it still be avoided? Maybe. Only history will tell. Is it likely to be avoidable? I don't think so. In fact, I think last night and this morning, there's already been some troop movements of the Russians into the Ukraine. Can the Ukraine defend itself? Will the United States get involved? Will European countries play a role? I don't know. But it could turn into something really, really big, or it could fizzle and turn into nothing, which is what we all hope for. But I think that it's coming. So we can see, even 4 years before the Civil War, the writing is on the wall. So this guy named Charles Sumner has given a speech in front of Congress denouncing the Missouri Compromise and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. He's upset at the fact that they're going to allow Kansas Territory to determine its slave status based on popular sovereignty. He doesn't like it. He believes that they should stick with the old 36 degrees 30 minutes north latitude line. It's a rule that was set earlier, and why should we change rules that were set many, many years earlier? So during his speech, here's where he makes a critical mistake. He calls out 3 people. And these three people are very powerful, influential people. The first one is Stephen Douglas, a senator from Illinois. Stephen Douglas, he is anti-slave, but he is popular sovereignty. Douglas doesn't think slavery is good. He's from Illinois. There aren't slaves in Illinois, or if there are very, very few. But he believes that the power should be held by the people. Is that understandable? The popular sovereignty is a good idea, that the people should be choosing their path in America. That's Stephen Douglas's stance. It doesn't make him a bad person, but Charles Sumner is like, Stephen Douglas is an idiot because he believes in popular sovereignty when we've already determined the outcome of this event. So he's calling him out. Now, Stephen Douglas, he's hanging out. He's not sitting in his desk. He's hanging out kind of like, just picture him leaned up against the wall listening to this guy. And Douglas was a fairly polished politician, so he knew not to overreact. If you're going to be in politics, you better be, you have to have what's called thick skin, which means when someone makes fun of you or picks on you, you just got to kind of let it bounce. Think about that in terms of being Joe Biden or Donald Trump and the number of people that are always hating on him. How many of us really literally could handle going very long knowing that half the country or more than half the country dislike you greatly? Maybe hate's too strong of a word. That'd be really hard. Here's the thing. I don't need you all to like me, but I don't really want you to hate me. That's kind of the difference. So Stephen Douglas, he's a strong guy. He's like, meh, okay, you be you. Probably in his mind thinking at some point I'll get even anyway, because that's what we do, right? We plot our revenge, and revenge is a best served cold, a meal best served cold. So let things stew for a little while. When Mr. Macklin does something mean to me, I don't retaliate right away. I wait a week or two until he's forgot that I'm upset with him, and then I attack. Like, I'll send Angela over to his room during Win. And then he gets angry. He gets really mad. He's like, why'd you do that? Why do I have to put up with her? He also calls out a man named James Mason from Virginia, who was pro-slave, and a man from South Carolina named Andrew Pickens Butler. I know, the name's kind of funny when your middle name is Pickens and your last name is Butler. Okay, never mind. So that's not funny. Anyway, here's the problem. As these guys are sitting around listening to this, what Charles Sumner did not know, or if he did know, he was very ignorant to do this. Andrew Pickens Butler wasn't there. What's rule number one about talking about someone when they're not there? You don't do it. If I have something bad to say about you, I'm going to say it to your face, because it's not cool if I say it when you're not here. It's a little bit different if I'm just joking around making fun of Aaron, because I know you'll tell him that I made fun of him. That's okay, because I'm just in jest. But if I have something really upset to say, I better wait till you're here. I'm going to say it to your face. Otherwise, it's cowardly. Butler wasn't there. He was at home recovering in South Carolina from a stroke. He was near death. So not only was the guy not there, but he was dying. And he's hammering on him about his issues with slavery. In fact, he says that Andrew Pickens Butler has taken on a mistress. What's a mistress? A woman that's not his wife. Except it wasn't a woman. He says that mistress is the harlot. Like a harlot is like a, I don't know, a derogatory term. Like a dirty woman. Slavery. So his mistress is slavery. And he said the South was immoral, and he mocked the state of South Carolina. So he's saying really bad things about a man that's not there, and he's sick and dying. Stephen Douglas, as he's leaning up against the wall listening, he whispers to the guy next to him. He says, this is a quote, he says, that damned fool will get himself killed by some other damned fool. Like, he's saying, that guy better watch what he says, because there are certain things that are just off limits. You can't say them. And making fun of a sick and dying guy is really, really not okay. You shouldn't do that. So also in the room was a man named Preston Brooks, who was a representative in the House from the state of South Carolina. And Preston Brooks happened to be the nephew of Andrew Pickens Butler. So he's listening to this guy making fun of his uncle. Now, many of us, I think, hopefully most of us, like our uncles and our aunts. In fact, usually they're good guys in the family. I always taught my nephews and nieces things that you're not supposed to teach little kids, like uh, not dirty jokes, jokes that mom and dad certainly wouldn't approve of. Or I'd give them Christmas presents that were super annoying because I like to upset their parents. So I like to think that I'm that good uncle and that my nephews would defend me the same way Preston Brooks is going to defend Charles Sumner. So Preston Brooks is sitting back listening to this and he's kind of simmering over it. So he decides he's going to do something to get back for his recuperating uncle. But he thinks also, and actually people would challenge others that have questioned their dignity to a duel. But he doesn't believe Charles Sumner is deserving of a duel. That's how big of a scoundrel this guy is. So he decides, he comes up with the plan to attack Charles Sumner. Now listen, Sumner, he's in the Senate, and Preston Brooks is in the House of Representatives. So they're not always together, but they're close by. So one day, Preston Brooks comes to the House of Representatives with a walking stick, with a cane, which wasn't at all unusual for a person of privilege. It was sort of like a accessory. Did he need a cane? No. But did it make him look cooler? I guess. So he shows up in the Senate one day with a walking stick and 100% pure full-on plans to beat Charles Sumner. So he walks in, the first day he walks in and he looks around in the Senate, and the Senate is not in session, but the men are usually sitting at their desks working on stuff. He walks in and Charles Sumner's not there. So he's like, dang it. He leaves, goes back to his own office in the House of Representatives, and he waits. Again, a lot of things simmer a little bit. In fact, maybe he'll even calm down. Comes back the next day, and he enters into the Senate chamber. And again, the Senate is not in session, but there's people all over the place buzzing around. And he sees Charles Sumner off in the distance. And he sits back because there's one problem that he's got here. There's a lot of people, but not only a lot of people, but there are women near Charles Sumner. And because Preston Brooks is a gentleman who's about to beat the snot out of another man in public, you don't commit acts of violence in front of ladies. So the guy has some pleasantries about him, I guess. So he stands back and waits. He's very patient in his whooping. Drew, you might want to move your Chromebook because it's coming down hard just in a minute. So it'd probably be that's a good idea. So he's patient, and pretty soon the women leave, and he sneaks over quietly with his walking stick, and he sneaks up behind Charles Sumner, who's just quietly writing on some paper at his desk. And when Charles Sumner least expects it, he comes up over the top and bam, 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 bam. And Charles Sumner does what all of us would do. He tries to stand up, but he's at a desk kind of like the ones you guys are in. And as he tries to stand up, the desk and the seat are connected to each other, so he can't push himself back. And he's getting beat, bam, 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 over the head with the stick. He can't get up. He blocks the stick with his arm, which probably is what we would do too. His head is bloodied. He's getting the snot beat out of him. Bam, bam. And some people jump up and grab Preston Brooks while Charles Sumner falls to the floor in a pile. We just saw this man beat almost to death. In fact, there's a chance Charles Sumner is going to die. So the outcome of this, as Sumner is literally doing nothing, he says, by the way, you have libeled the state and slandered my relation who is old and absent, and I feel it my duty to punish you. That's what he says as he's beating the snot out of this guy. So he beats him with the cane. Brooks finally is pulled off. Sumner falls to the floor. Brooks is arrested. Of course he's arrested. He's just committed assault. You can't do that. You can't beat a man to near death. But almost immediately released. I'm going to ignore that for now. So, supporters of Brooks, by the way, he's sent home. He's kicked out of the House of Representatives. He's sent home, and of course, his cane had shattered to little pieces. He's sent home, and the people of South Carolina were so pleased with what he had done by almost killing a man in front of Congress that they sent him dozens of walking sticks and canes in a show of support. So he's kicked out of the House, serves no jail time for almost killing a man. It takes Charles Sumner 3 years to fully recover. While he's gone, the state of Massachusetts leaves his seat in the Senate empty as a show of support for Charles Sumner. Nobody's there. After 3 years, Sumner returns back to Congress, back to the Senate. You'd think maybe that incident would have shut him up a little bit in his anti-slavery stance. Instead, as soon as he returns back to the Senate, he continues speaking out against slavery and in favor of the abolition of slavery. Preston Brooks' story isn't over. Within a matter of 2 years, he's actually re-elected to the House of Representatives and they send him back. So we have a true act of violence within Congress. In fact, probably, I hate to say it, but if Congress would be a little bit more like the WWE, would we show a little more interest in what they're doing on a regular basis?
Yeah, probably.
Maybe. But let's have it be a little more controlled than sneaking up on a man. And so if what Charles Sumner did was underhanded and deceitful, coming up from behind and beating a guy with a stick isn't a whole lot better, is it? That's both kind of a cowardly act. It is sort of an eye for an eye, which definitely was more of a prevalent attitude of that time than it is even today. So, but I think that if we have disagreements, if Nancy Pelosi and her Republican counterpart disagree on something, let's stick them in a barbed wire cage and let them go. I'd watch that. We could even put it on pay-per-view and probably pay off some of the national debt.
Let's do it.
We got all kinds of good ideas.
Well, this story has me thinking.
Well, that'll be a first.
I know, right?
I know.
But the saying is, sticks and stones may break your bones. But Charles Sumner's words did hurt him.
Charles, you're exactly right. So, yeah. When Mama says sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Yeah, he did get himself in some pretty hot water because of what he said. That's pretty cowardly, though, to attack a man that's not even there. I don't think that that's okay. So Charles Sumner speaks out against pro-slave Kansas, and Preston Brooks hears him and beats him with a stick. By the way, this was an interesting discussion about 12 years ago when I bought this stick. I'm at, what's that craft store where you can buy Halloween? Nobby's. Nobby's is a place too, I think. They always have good Halloween stuff. Anyway, it was like after Halloween sale, and I'm buying a cane, and my wife looks at me like, this was even before I was kind of crippled up with my gimpiness. She looks at me like, what are you doing? Why are you buying a cane? And I'm like, never mind. Now, you can see that my cane has been used and abused for a while because it is sort of taped together. And in all the years that I've been bamming people, I've never actually harmed a student. Just let's make that clear. Let's make that clear for the people on the video that I never actually stricken. I didn't ever hit him, actually. It was close, very close, and he might have cried a little in the process, but I never So those of you that are watching the screen and can't see video of what I did, it looked like I was maybe going to harm Drew a lot, but I've never yet missed and struck a student. Now, if he would have been flailing about, I probably would have accidentally nicked him a little. So Brooks is a hero, and the Republican political party is created out of this event. Now, political parties have changed over time. Political parties have always had differences of opinions in how things should go down. But the political party is an anti-slave party. That's where it gets its roots. By the way, just think about how different history would be if the decisive weapons were different. Like, what if Preston Brooks comes out with a a lightsaber and starts just like slashing at Charles Sumner. Anyway, it used to work. I think either the batteries are dead or I broke it, probably smashing someone. But again, try understanding when I took this out of the, we're throwing out toys and donating stuff to Goodwill, and I'm putting this in my car, and my wife's like, why are you taking a toy lightsaber to school? And I'm like, well, you never know when you're going to need a toy lightsaber. So it used to light up like, and then when you just wave it around, it go, it was really pretty cool. So if anybody has a toy lightsaber that is functioning and they don't use it anymore, I probably would like to have it. Anyway, what happened? How'd I go back so many slides? So the Republican Party is created out of the hatred for slavery. And among the first candidates, we're going to see some old know-nothings, or some old free soilers, excuse me. But here's an image of what the caning of Charles Sumner might have looked like. Bloodied and bludgeoned him up. This is Preston Brooks, and this is Charles Sumner. What? I know, like, put it on pay-per-view and pay the bills for the government, right? I don't even know if it matters what your political viewpoint's on. It'd be like watching a real fight, you know. But there's some dudes in Congress, though, that are pretty tough guys, you know. There's that Dan Crenshaw, who only has one eyeball, who fought in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's how he lost his eye. But I don't think I want to pick a fight with him. You know, probably if I had to pick a fight with someone to go in the cage with, and I'm looking at the people that I know of in Congress or in political office, I'm probably thinking maybe President Biden, because he doesn't look very strong, really. I don't know. It'd be embarrassing, though, if he beat me up. Like, no, don't hurt me, Joe.
I could probably have him in a death.
You think? You think he's tough? Think he's got guns? He looks like he could shove him over easily. Yeah, probably 50 years ago. But he, you know, I'm old though too, so I think it's fair.
Man literally looks like he forgot to die.
There's a lot of those. Doesn't he kind of look like he forgot to die? Yeah. But you got a young guy versus an old guy. Really, is that fair either? You know, so we're not only throwing in the guy's got a stick against the guy that doesn't have a stick, that doesn't know it's coming. You know, this is kind of a cowardly incident. It's probably equally cowardly as to calling out the honor of this guy's uncle, but that's what happens. So we have two new political parties that develop out of the issue of pro-slave and anti-slave. So we've had political parties before, and remember, George Washington said, don't do it, but we did it anyway. The first two were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And then we've had know-nothings who are nativists and believe that we shouldn't allow any immigrants into the country. And then we had, what was the one just the other day? Free soilers who believed in free land and free men. And the free soilers are going to be part of the Republican Party. So the Republican Party's original platform was the opposition of the expansion of slavery. They opposed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which meant that popular sovereignty would determine the outcome of slave versus free in Kansas. And their leader was John C. Fremont. He was probably, I guess you would say, the first true Republican. And they were supported more by Northerners and abolitionists and free soilers. So you're not going to have a lot of Republican votes in the South. So you might guess that that's where the Democrats are going to have their stronghold. So this is the first platform of that particular political party. We could create our own political party if we wanted to that has nothing to do with race or with politics. We could create a political party that says that our platform is free pizza for everyone. And I bet if we created that political party, we would have some support for it. Jace is like, heck yeah, I'm in.
Anyway, we're going to raise your taxes by like $20.
Well, we got to raise the pizza money, right? We got to get some pizza money. I had a buddy named Todd in college who I could always get him to buy pizza because he had a job. His sons, two of his sons, just wrestled in the state tournament this weekend. So his kids are older than mine, but anyway. That's the Republican Party. The first of the Democrat Party supported states' rights. So it wasn't so much necessarily pro-slave. It was pro-popular sovereignty, letting the people choose. So the other day in class, we held a vote. We said, should we have crispy chicken sandwiches from Chick-fil-A or should we have Casey's Pizza? And we let the class decide. So today we're having crispy chicken sandwiches from Chick-fil-A. So don't worry about going to lunch. Just go over to Mr. Macklin's room at lunchtime and wait for your crispy chicken sandwich. There aren't any crispy chicken sandwiches coming. Probably be really hungry if you decide to wait. But that's how popular sovereignty works. It's based on the rule of the majority of the people. And honestly, our government is never, it's not even intended to make all the people happy all the time. The goal of our government is to make most of the people happy most of the time. Is it possible that you could live in America and never like our leadership and never like any of the decisions that are made? It's possible. It's not likely because things kind of go up and down and back and forth, and there's, ups and downs in life. It's just like when we watch high school sports or whatever your favorite sports team is. There's ups and downs. The Patriots win like 5 out of 6 Super Bowls or something there for a while. They were like the best and nobody could touch them. And now the Patriots are middle of the pack. There's ups and there's downs. When I first started coaching high school wrestling in Blair, Mr. McLean and I, we'd cross our fingers to get 1 or 2 state qualifiers. And now the Blair Bears are pretty good. They finished 4th in the state tournament with a champion and 3 runners-up. So things go up and down. Right now, Bennington is the best wrestling team in Class B. Will they always be? No. They're going to be really good for a while yet because I know some of what's coming up into their program. But no, so we see hits and misses, ups and downs with both parties. They favor limited government, which I'm going to come back to this in just a minute. James Buchanan is their leader. They also get most of their support from slave supporters, so planters in the South. Southern Whigs, which is another political party, also support the Democrats. So when we look at the growth and the change of political parties over time, slavery isn't an issue for political parties today, but race oftentimes is. Is it a little bit funny, and this isn't intended to start a political argument, but if I ask you the question, where are Democrats the strongest today, the political party, where are they the strongest when it comes to getting votes for, say, president? California is a super stronghold for Democrats.
Cities.
Big cities, very good, big cities. Rural areas tend to be more frequently Republican. So when we look at race, again, I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but oftentimes history is stereotypical. What do the majority of African American people vote, Democrat or Republican? Democrat. If we stepped back and this was the platform of our political parties today, if this was truly what represented Republican and Democrat, which side would African Americans vote for if this was today? Which one?
Republican.
They'd vote Republican because of, obviously we're not worried about the expansion of slavery, but if you're trying to stop the expansion of slavery, then you must also be at least a little bit concerned with equality. Maybe not all in concern, but a little bit. Abolitionists, free soilers believed in free men. If we look today, if you like limited government, so let's say you don't like paying a lot of taxes and you think the government should be smaller and that the states should have more authority, which political party is the stronger believer in that mindset today? The Republicans. So we've seen kind of a shift. Now that doesn't mean that Republicans are racist and believe in slavery or the expansion of slavery, but if I ask you which one tends to be more conservative and wants to shrink the government and save the money, with the exception of the military, Republicans is usually that political party. So they change over time. What is the Republican Party and what is the Democrat Party in 2022 is not what they will be in 2042. they're going to shift. Their positions will begin to change, or they will evolve and change over time. How? Well, that depends on you guys, because in just a few years, you're the voters. And the people that you elect to represent you, whether Democrat or Republican, will be the ones that are making those changes. Or you run for political office and you make those changes. So we, the people, are the ones that form the politics of our country. If we allow bad things to happen, it's probably our fault because we don't exercise our right to vote. Or if for some reason you think that your person doesn't do what he should be doing or she should be doing, then you run for office and you do it. Those are opportunities that we've got in America. So moving on. This guy's name is Dred Scott. I used to do a big activity with Dred Scott, and then they cut my time by 50 minutes a week, so I had to cut out the activity. But this is an interesting character. So we look for influential black people, influential minorities, influential women all throughout history, and sometimes they're hardish to find because the writers of history are usually typically old white men, at least until modern times. So sometimes the stories of women and sometimes the stories of minorities are sort of pushed to the side. Not his. Dred Scott is a slave in Missouri. He worked for an army doctor named Dr. John Emerson. So he wasn't like a field slave. In fact, Dred Scott, you can see here, is wearing nice clothes. Dred Scott was probably more like a butler, servant type guy. I mean, his boss is an army doctor, and Dred Scott did not have a horrible life other than the fact that he was human property. He was allowed to marry, and he was kept together with his wife. So he had if you had to be a slave, being Dred Scott probably wasn't the worst case scenario. Obviously, nobody wants to be a slave, so I'm not condoning that. But this guy had it pretty good. Well, Missouri is a slave state. So Dr. John Emerson, and if you're a doctor in the Army, you belong to the Army. If you join the military, you have no control over where you go. You can put in requests. You can say, I'd like to be stationed at Offutt Air Force Base, if you're in the Air Force, in Bellevue, because then I could be close to family and I could be close to friends still. But if the Air Force wants to put you in California, they move you to California. When you sign on the line and join the military, you become property of the U.S. government. They get to pick what happens to you for the most part. So Dr. Emerson gets reassigned to a base in Illinois. So he packs up his stuff, including his slave and his wife, and he moves them to Illinois. Illinois is a free state. While in Illinois, Dred Scott and his wife remained the property of Dr. Emerson. Then Dr. Emerson was told by the Army, we're moving you back to Missouri. So they moved back to Missouri. And while they're in Missouri, Dred Scott talking to some of his buddies, and they're like, where were you? And he's like, oh, I was in Illinois. And they're like, oh, Illinois is a free state. And there's this law or this rule that says once free, always free. So Dred Scott had been taken to a state where slavery was outlawed, which means could he have been a slave in Illinois? Then he's brought back to Missouri. Dred Scott didn't even realize or understand that he had been a free man. He's like, really? No kidding. So he sues Dr. John Emerson for his freedom. This case gets heard in court. In fact, it not only gets heard in court, but they're not really quite sure what to do with Dred Scott's case. By the way, that is one of the coolest names in history. Legit. Dred is a cool name. I like it. If I ever have another child, I'm going to name him Dred. Even if it's a girl, Dred. Dred Bellamy. I like it. It's going to stick. So he sues. His court case makes it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. He argues for his freedom because he'd been taken to free territories. The Supreme Court ruled against him. Even though once free, always free was an edict of the time, the Supreme Court said, no, you're still a slave. Any guesses why the Supreme Court ruled against Dred Scott in his case for freedom? Something to do with the military, maybe. Military men have a different set of rules. That's a possibility. It's not correct, but that's a good answer. What does that have to do with anything? Stay with that because you're not wrong. If you're a black man in America, even if you're a free black man in America, do you have the same rights as a white person?
Not yet.
No, not even in. We go up to the 1960s and the Civil Rights Act, and blacks weren't equal. Sure, you can. I mean, we have racism and prejudice all over the place, but legally today, those rights exist. It's just whether all those laws and rights are upheld in all parts of the country. You're not wrong. But legally, the Constitution protects all the rights. At this time, the Constitution doesn't protect the rights of any black person. So once the case gets to the Supreme Court, it's heard. Look at that guy. That's the Chief Justice. He looks like he forgot to die. He's an old racist white man. His name is Roger Taney. It looks like Taney. It's pronounced Taney. If you say Taney, I don't care. You will be asked that question at some point. Roger Taney. He's the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice doesn't have any more power than the other justices. The Chief Justice really only authority over the Supreme Court is they're the ones that pick which cases get to be heard. So as Chief Justice Roger Taney is looking at the cases in front of the Supreme Court, he looks at Dred Scott's case and he throws it out. His case is never heard in front of the Supreme Court. And the reason being, Scott is not a citizen because blacks weren't citizens, they were property, and even free blacks still weren't citizens. Therefore, he could not use the court system. So it wasn't that the law kept Dred Scott a slave. It's the fact that Dred Scott didn't have the authority to sue for his own freedom. So the Supreme Court and Roger Taney throw it out. He's bound by Missouri slave laws. It doesn't matter that he was ever taken to Illinois. And if you take Dred Scott away from his master, that would be taking away Fifth Amendment rights to private property. So the Fifth Amendment has a couple of proponents or components to it. It says that you can't be tried for the same crime twice, and it also protects my right to own things. So you can't just take away another man's property. And that's what Dred Scott was. So all of this, we go through all of this headache, and it's like, you're serious? Why does it even make the history books if Dred Scott doesn't win? Because we would think there would be a happy outcome for Scott and his wife. The reality of it is, there was a happy outcome, sort of. A rich white woman in the North hears about the case, so she feels bad for Dred Scott and his wife. Legally, nothing changes, but she feels bad for Scott, so she purchases him and his wife and sets them free. So Dred Scott eventually gets his freedom. Unfortunately for Scott, within like a month or two of earning his freedom, of becoming a free man, he dies of pneumonia. It's like, wah, wah, wah. Come on. History really has a way of sneaking up and kicking us in the pants. The 14th Amendment later undid the Dred Scott decision because the 14th Amendment makes blacks citizens. So we'll see in the next chapter, chapter 16 and chapter 17, 3 amendments or changes to the Constitution that have a huge impact on blacks. They're called Civil War amendments. The 13th Amendment says slavery is outlawed. That's kind of critical. The 14th Amendment gives blacks citizenship, and the 15th Amendment actually gives blacks the right to vote. So we see 3 gigantic steps forward in giving rights to black people. But Roger Taney, the man who forgot to die, it just looks sad, doesn't he? What happens to your face to make it so droopy?
The Alzheimer's really got to his head. He just forgot.
Maybe. And that's an issue that sometimes we have with the Supreme Court in particular. How long do they get to stay in office? Until they retire or die. We've got one right now that's in the process of retiring. He's 80-some years old. Here's the thing. Do you want to work until you're 80? Well, yeah, it doesn't mean they're not good, but doesn't mean they are good either. You got to think that, and this isn't true for everyone, but most 80-year-old people I know don't have the stamina to work as much as most 50-year-old people I know. Is that fair to say? I mean, 80-year-olds need naps, right? 50-year-olds, I'm not 50 yet, but I'm close-ish. I don't need naps. I'm fine. So, how are we doing here, Lantry?
Almost 10 minutes left.
Okay, so you're paying attention, close attention. I got 5 minutes left. I'm going to start this, and I probably won't stop it today. So we get through a lot of material today, and I apologize if I'm going too fast. This is Abraham Lincoln. We know him. This guy named Stephen Douglas. You've probably never heard of Stephen Douglas. That's okay, because I'm going to teach you about Stephen Douglas today. These are both interesting characters, both from the state of Illinois. In fact, the first introduction to Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas I'm going to give you, they're running for a congressional seat in the state of Illinois. They're not running for president. They're running for House of Representatives in Illinois. It's a state election, much, much smaller than a national election. So if I give you a little bit of background, we'll start with Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was 6 feet 4 inches tall. Remember, we just talked the other day that John Brown was 6 feet tall and he was a giant of a man compared to normal, which was 5'6". Lincoln is 6'4". He is the tallest president in U.S. history. Trump may have been close. Trump and Obama were tall men. 6'2", 6'3". So they're also very tall. The shortest president in U.S. history was James Madison. Clear back here. 5'4". He's a little guy. Anyway, so, okay, but I want you to imagine this for a minute. So we got 6'4" Abraham Lincoln, weighed 180 pounds, which that's like a toothpick for a man that's 6'4". What is Mr. Flynn, about 6'4"? So imagine Mr. Flynn weighing 180 pounds. That'd be 45 pounds lighter than me.
It's
Bo? But I bet he even weighs more than $180, doesn't he?
probably a little bit more.
So Abraham Lincoln was a tall, is he 6'4", Bo? Tall, skinny man. Wasn't much to him. He had no college education. His family was very, very poor. He was raised in a one-room log cabin in Kentucky until his family moved to Springfield, Illinois. He had 1 year of formal education. No college. He had 1 year of schooling because his family was too poor. He was raised by a stepmom. His mother had passed away. And he had a great affinity. He loved his stepmom. Like she was a sweetheart to him. So she was critically important. He eventually marries the woman of his dreams, but she's a caste above him. So Mary Todd has money and wealth. Originally, Lincoln is denied the right to marry Mary Todd because Mary's father doesn't want his daughter marrying this poor guy. So hold on to that. Time out. I gotta shut my speaker off. You don't need to hear what I'm talking about on the phone. Hello. No. Yep. They were asking about Maya. He said, did she quit staring at you yet? I'm like, no. Anyway, Abe Lincoln, we're going to get to the other guy in a little bit. He marries Mary Todd. They have 4 children together. 3 of them died before Abraham. So this guy and his wife deal with some heavy stuff. And by the way, we'll get to this in more detail later, but Mary, Abraham's wife, super needy. Like she needed a lot. She was what we would consider today a shopaholic. Like if Target existed back then, she would have been at Target every day or on Amazon every day. And Abraham didn't have a lot of money. Even as president, he was not at all wealthy. So she spent every penny that they had. His only son to survive was Robert. My time's up?
Yep.
Okay, can I show you one more thing before I have to hand out your worksheet? So, actually, I'll hold off on my one more thing because it'll fit better if I have plenty of time. So, okay, so those of you watching on the YouTube, I'm going to shut you down right now.
when you get back, you're going to need to grab from me a Chapter 15, Section 1 and 2 worksheet and take care of that. Have a great day.